all that celebrations are magnificent, at the heart of the pageantry is a simple message: service.
The final signature took less than 3 seconds, but its consequences reached across an entire royal generation. Prince William lowered his pen onto a decree stripping Meghan of the Duchess of Sussex title and permanently excluding both Sussexes from every official royal event. No ceremony, no public warning, just one controlled movement, followed by a silence so absolute that even the advisors surrounding him seemed afraid to breathe. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William kept his hand beside the document as the Buckingham Palace council chamber fell still. The decree had reached that table after weeks of legal preparation and constitutional consultation, a process designed to test whether the crown could separate blood ties from royal duty. A royal decree was a written command issued under sovereign authority, and this one carried consequences no apology could reverse. It removed Meghan's Duchess of Sussex title and barred both her and Prince Harry from coronations, jubilees, state banquets, memorial services, balcony appearances, and every event conducted in the monarchy's name. The prince stared at Harry's name longer than anyone expected. He remembered a younger brother beside him through grief, duty, and the loss of Diana. Yet memory offered no escape from the decision waiting beneath his fingers. Across the table, King Charles watched the future king with a father's devastation and a monarch's restraint. He knew the signature would not merely alter ceremonial access, it would sever the last official thread connecting his younger son to the institution he had been born to serve. Charles lowered his eyes when an aide placed a sealed annex beside the decree. The annex, a confidential attachment containing terms, had not been shown to the wider household, and its presence suggested that Meghan's lost title was only the visible edge of punishment. William said nothing, as a senior courtier crossed to the official calendar and removed 2 Sussex name cards from forthcoming ceremonies. The scrape of paper against wood seemed louder than any argument. The king reached toward the decree as though he might reopen it, challenge it, or delay what had begun. His hand stopped halfway. He withdrew it, looked toward his eldest son, and said only, "Then it is done." William did not answer. He knew the palace statement could not be released until one final message had been delivered privately to Meghan, and he insisted that Harry hear the decision directly from him. But while the palace prepared its announcement, the 2 brothers were moving toward a conversation neither of them would ever be able to undo. Long before decrees, titles, and locked palace gates divided them, William and Harry had been 2 boys walking behind their mother's coffin, beneath the gaze of the world. That shared grief once made their bond seem unbreakable. Now one brother carried the future of the crown, while the other stood outside it. Between them was Meghan, defiant, wounded, and convinced the monarchy had never intended to accept her. William had learned to survive by controlling what he felt. As the future monarch, the person expected to inherit the throne and protect the continuity of the crown, he believed private pain could never be allowed to weaken public duty. Harry had chosen the opposite path. He and Meghan had built a new life around freedom from palace control, speaking openly about wounds the royal household had expected them to carry in silence. Yet the Sussex title remained their final official bond to the institution, giving them status, history, and a place within the family's formal story. The prince felt every public disclosure as a personal betrayal, but anger concealed something far more painful. He mourned the brother he once protected, the boy who had looked toward him for reassurance when the world became unbearable. Harry no longer seemed to need that protection. Worse, William feared his younger brother now saw him not as family, but as the face of everything he had escaped. Meghan received the decree differently. She saw no measured act of royal protection, only confirmation that the family had chosen institutional survival over reconciliation. The lost title mattered because it had once represented acceptance, however fragile, and its removal told her that the door had not simply closed, it had been locked from the inside. Charles had tried to prevent that final break. During a documented private meeting at Clarence House, the king asked his eldest son to preserve Meghan's title as one last bridge to Harry. William refused after reviewing the sealed annex, a confidential attachment containing evidence too sensitive for the public decree. The monarch understood then that his plea had arrived too late. Catherine knew why. At Windsor, she found William sitting alone with an old photograph of himself and Harry resting in his hand. The Princess of Wales had witnessed the private incident that transformed his hesitation into certainty, and she recognized the grief before he spoke. He turned the photograph face down and said, "I cannot protect him from the consequences anymore." She remained beside him, knowing the decree had begun long before the pen touched paper. The true cause was not an interview, a memoir, or a distant accusation. It was one disastrous royal ceremony, one closed room, and one moment no one inside it could forget. And when the palace looked back for the exact moment reconciliation died, every path led to the same closed door at St. George's Chapel. The rupture did not begin in California or inside a television studio. It began at St. George's Chapel during a private memorial ceremony intended to unite the family. Beneath solemn prayers and carefully arranged seats, years of resentment finally surfaced. One exchange, spoken behind a closed vestry door, transformed unease into open hostility, and convinced William that Meghan no longer wanted reconciliation on any terms the crown could accept. Charles had arranged the gathering as one final act of hope. Harry and Meghan were invited quietly, without public notice, because the king believed privacy might succeed where statements, interviews, and formal negotiations had failed. A memorial service was a ceremony held to honor someone who had died, but this occasion carried another purpose, bringing a fractured family into the same sacred space without the pressure of cameras. William, Catherine, Camilla, Anne, and several trusted aides were present, each aware that one wrong word could destroy the fragile peace. Meghan entered the vestry minutes before the service and asked Catherine to remain behind. The vestry was a private room beside the chapel where clergy and participants prepared before a ceremony, making it the one place where their exchange could happen beyond public hearing. She demanded a guaranteed central role at future royal events, including balcony appearances and formal recognition for Archie and Lilibet. Catherine answered carefully, explaining that ceremonial positions followed working responsibilities, not private demands. The restraint only deepened the anger. Meghan accused the princess of benefiting from a system that had humiliated her, while Catherine insisted that protecting the children required patience, trust, and boundaries. Their voices rose. William opened the door, just as Meghan declared that the monarchy would need the Sussex name before the Sussexes ever needed the monarchy. The prince did not hear frustration. He heard a warning. Harry arrived moments later and found his brother staring toward a handbag left near the wall. A private recording device was discovered inside it after an aide noticed a blinking light. The device, a small tool designed to capture speech without public notice, raised the terrifying possibility that the confrontation had been prepared for future release. When questioned in a documented palace account, Harry denied knowing it was there, but his hesitation lasted long enough to change William's expression. Charles stood in the corridor, holding the printed order of service, while the raised voices carried through the door. When Meghan emerged, the king folded the paper slowly and could not meet his younger son's eyes. Harry followed her in silence, and the monarch understood that his attempt at unity had become the point of no return. William did not confront Meghan that day. He waited, gathered the evidence, and months later summoned both Sussexes for one final private reckoning. By the time the Sussexes entered that final meeting, William was no longer asking whether the family could be repaired. He was deciding what had to be removed. There were no cameras, no private secretaries, and no prepared speeches when William faced Harry and Meghan inside a small Windsor sitting room. The doors closed behind them, leaving 4 chairs, a low table, and years of accumulated anger. William placed the unsigned decree between them. Meghan refused to look down. Harry stared directly at his brother, already understanding that this was not another warning, it was goodbye. William had arranged the meeting before the decree became final, because he wanted one last answer, without advisors shaping the words. Catherine sat beside him, silent but watchful, while the Sussexes faced them across the table. The proposed terms were severe: complete confidentiality, no commercial use of royal association, no unauthorized recording, and no public attacks on working family members. Ceremonial inclusion meant permission to attend official occasions, such as state services and national celebrations, and the prince made clear that access would continue only if trust could be rebuilt. Harry leaned forward first. He accused his brother of punishing Meghan for surviving an institution that had failed to protect her. William answered that the crown could not function while every private conversation carried the threat of becoming a future headline, documentary, or paid disclosure. The younger brother called that fear an excuse. The future king called it experience. Meghan finally looked at the decree. She told William that removing her title would not erase what she had endured, or silence what she knew. Catherine answered quietly, but the words cut through the room. Pain did not excuse deliberate destruction. The princess had witnessed the chapel confrontation, and her restraint now carried more force than anger. Meghan turned toward her, but before she could respond, William opened a sealed evidence file. The prince revealed, through a documented palace security report, that the recording device found at St. George's Chapel carried identifying information linked to a member of the Sussex communications team. Harry turned toward his wife in visible shock. He asked whether she had known. Her silence lasted only seconds, yet it landed harder than any denial. Harry pushed his chair backward so sharply that it struck the wall. William did not move. He slid the unsigned decree across the table and said, "I asked you here as my brother. I will sign it as the heir." The heir was the person next in line to inherit the throne, and in that moment, the title became a boundary between duty and blood. Meghan rose first. She rejected every condition and declared that no title was worth surrendering her voice. Harry remained seated, trapped between his wife and the brother he could no longer reach. After they left, William discovered a private letter from Charles requesting one final delay. Yet the greatest resistance to William's decree would not come from Meghan or Harry. It would come from the father, still desperate to save his son. King Charles had spent a lifetime placing duty above emotion, but the decree forced those two loyalties into direct conflict. As monarch, he understood why William believed the Sussex connection had become dangerous. As a father, he saw only the final disappearance of his younger son. Hours before the signing, Charles summoned the future king alone, and placed an unsigned letter of mercy beside the decree. Charles asked for time, not victory. Although William had initiated the action, the king still carried the moral authority to delay it, and he used that influence for one final appeal. His proposal was simple but painful. Meghan's title would be suspended for 5 years, while Harry would still be allowed to attend funerals and private family ceremonies. A suspension meant the title would become temporarily unusable rather than permanently removed, leaving one narrow road back. William read the mercy letter without changing expression. Charles reminded him that the punishment would reach beyond Harry and Meghan. Archie and Lilibet might grow up believing the palace had rejected them before they were old enough to understand the conflict. The monarch feared that the decree would turn family history into inherited bitterness, passing one generation's wounds into the next. The prince answered with equal control. Preserving ceremonial access would allow the same conflict to return at every major royal moment, from memorials to coronations. Catherine and their children would remain under constant strain, never knowing whether a private exchange might become public material. The future king insisted that duty could not survive if every invitation reopened the same danger. Charles then admitted what he had hidden for months. Through a series of private letters sent by secure courier, he had been communicating with Harry and trying to create a pathway back without William's knowledge. The confession carried both hope and shame. The king had believed those letters belonged only to a father and son. William opened a folder and placed one of the messages beside a draft proposal for a Sussex media project. Several private phrases from Charles's correspondence appeared almost word for word in the planned production. The prince explained that the material had been documented during the palace review, making the betrayal impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Charles removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against his eyes. The silence stretched until even the mercy letter seemed heavier on the table. He finally set it aside and said, "I wanted to believe he was writing only to me." The king did not endorse the decree. He simply stopped resisting it. In doing so, he transferred the full burden of the decision to William, along with the knowledge that the crown would be protected at the cost of a father's final hope. With the king's final resistance broken, a secure telephone rang in California, carrying the words Meghan had feared, and prepared herself, to hear. The call arrived before sunrise in Montecito. Meghan listened without interruption, as a palace representative read the decree in formal, measured language. Her title was removed. Her place at future royal events was revoked. Her name would disappear from ceremonial documents within hours. When the voice finished, Meghan did not shout or plead. She simply lowered the phone, looked at Harry, and said, "Your brother has erased us." Harry said nothing at first. The official notice had arrived under strict embargo, a temporary rule preventing publication before an agreed time, which meant the Sussexes had only a narrow window before Buckingham Palace announced the decision to the world. Attached to the decree were 3 cancellations: an upcoming state banquet, a national memorial, and a future coronation planning ceremony. Each removal carried more than ceremonial weight. Those events connected him to his childhood, his mother, and the family role he had once assumed would last forever. Meghan held her composure until the prepared palace statement appeared on the screen. The words, formerly known as the Duchess of Sussex, stood in the center of the page, cold and final. Her expression changed. She had expected punishment, but that phrase transformed the decree into something personal, reducing years of royal identity to a title the palace now treated as history. Harry moved toward her, caught between defending his wife and understanding what permanent exclusion truly meant. He would no longer stand at national memorials connected to Diana. He would no longer enter royal ceremonies as the king's son. The silence between them deepened, because both understood that William had not merely closed a door, he had removed their names from the room entirely. Meghan called her communications team and ordered an immediate public response. She wanted the statement to accuse the palace of retaliation and declare that dignity could not be erased by royal command. Harry stopped her. He warned that striking back within minutes would confirm every fear his brother had raised about private conflict becoming public warfare. A second envelope arrived through a secure courier before either could continue. Charles had written only to Harry. The king explained that private family contact remained possible, but his younger son would have to return alone, without advisors, cameras, recording equipment, or commercial representatives. It was not a royal invitation. It was a father's final condition. Harry read the letter twice. He placed it beside the title notification, walked outside, and left Meghan alone at the kitchen table, with both documents between her hands. Across Britain, palace websites, patronage records, event lists, and internal seating plans were already being revised. The decree was becoming real line by line, and away from advisors, statements, and palace strategy, Harry made the one choice Meghan had not expected him to make. Harry returned to Britain without announcement, staff, or cameras. He did not enter through the grand gates of Buckingham Palace, nor was he greeted by uniformed officials. Instead, he met William after dusk inside a secluded cottage near Windsor. For the first time in years, there were no lawyers, wives, aides, or royal titles between them. There were only 2 brothers, and the wreckage of everything they had failed to save. Harry had accepted Charles's condition and traveled alone, but he asked to see his brother before facing their father. William agreed, choosing a modest family cottage instead of a palace office because he wanted no desk, seal, or ceremonial barrier between them. The line of succession, the formal order deciding who may inherit the throne, still included the younger prince, yet that fact offered little comfort when every working role had been taken away. The silence held until Harry admitted what the decree had done to him. He said he felt stripped not only of status, but of history, the ceremonies, memories, and family rituals that had shaped him since childhood. William listened, then confessed that signing the document had felt like burying their relationship while both of them were still alive. The future king did not speak with triumph. He spoke like a man carrying a choice he could never celebrate. Harry asked whether the decree could be reversed. William refused. Brotherhood, he said, could not remain permanent protection from consequences. The prince reminded him that every warning had been followed by another disclosure, another wound, another public fracture. His brother lowered his eyes because the accusation was painful, precisely because part of it was true. Harry then revealed through a private recorded account prepared for Charles that he had not known a recording device had been brought into St. George's Chapel. He admitted that his hesitation afterward had made him appear complicit, and that his silence had protected Meghan at the cost of his own credibility. William believed the regret, but not enough to undo the decision. The prince finally disclosed the limit of the sealed annex. It did not remove Harry from the succession or prohibit private family contact. The decree ended royal participation. It did not erase blood. That distinction mattered because Charles could still meet his son, and the brothers could still speak, even if the institution no longer recognized them as a united public family. Harry placed an old photograph of Diana and the two boys on the table. William studied it, then turned it upright. Neither brother called the gesture forgiveness, but both understood it as a beginning. Harry agreed not to challenge the decree legally or launch an immediate media attack. Their relationship remained damaged, yet open conflict had been stopped. By morning, the brothers' quiet agreement was buried beneath headlines, crowds, and a single front page that defined the decree for the world. Britain awoke to a front page unlike any royal headline in recent memory. Beneath the words, "The Final Exile," one newspaper printed Meghan's empty chair from a previous state banquet beside William's signature, enlarged across the page. Outside Buckingham Palace, supporters and critics gathered behind barriers, arguing over whether the decree represented necessary protection or unforgivable cruelty. The royal fracture had become a public verdict. Broadcasters interrupted regular programming within minutes. Meghan had lost the Duchess title, and both Sussexes were now excluded from every future official royal event. Palace officials described the action as a final administrative settlement, meaning a formal decision designed to close an unresolved institutional dispute. They argued that the crown could not protect its stability, confidentiality, or ceremonial integrity, while private royal access remained tied to repeated public conflict. The explanation was controlled. The reaction was not. Meghan's supporters condemned the decree as vindictive. They saw a woman punished for challenging traditions that had once expected her silence, and they argued that removing a title could not erase the grievances she had already placed before the world. William's defenders answered with equal force. They insisted that royal status could not exist forever, beside commercial criticism, secret recordings, and repeated breaches of family trust. To them, the prince had not acted out of cruelty. He had drawn the boundary others had been too afraid to enforce. The crowd outside the palace became the story's clearest symbol. One woman raised a handwritten sign reading, "A title is not a family," while an older veteran placed flowers beneath the gates with a note thanking William for protecting the crown. The two gestures stood only yards apart, yet they carried completely different ideas of loyalty. One mourned what the monarchy had rejected. The other honored what it had defended. Harry's decision changed the atmosphere before nightfall. During a major evening broadcast, a royal correspondent revealed through a documented private briefing that he had agreed not to contest the decree. Expectations of a legal battle or immediate media war weakened at once. His silence did not heal the family, but it prevented the rupture from becoming even more destructive. Meghan released a brief written statement soon afterward. She declared that dignity could not be removed by signature, yet she avoided attacking Harry, William, or Charles directly. The restraint was striking because everyone expected fury. Instead, she chose defiance without open war. Catherine watched the crowd footage alone. When the empty chair image returned to the screen, the princess switched off the television and sat in silence, understanding that royal survival had come at a deeply personal cost. When the crowds dispersed and the palace lights dimmed, only one question remained. Not what the decree had removed, but what its survivors would become without it. The decree did exactly what William intended. Meghan no longer carried the Duchess of Sussex title. She and Harry disappeared from official guest lists, ceremonial schedules, and future royal planning. Yet the signature did not erase their history, silence their pain, or restore the family that existed before the rupture. It achieved something colder and more permanent. It separated blood from duty and forced everyone involved to live with the difference. Meghan accepted the loss without asking the palace to restore what had been taken. In a carefully written public statement released through her own office, she presented herself not as an exiled duchess, but as an independent woman beyond royal authority. The Duchess title had once marked her formal place within the monarchy. Without it, she chose to build an identity no decree could control. Her voice remained, her access did not. Harry kept the promise he had made to William. He launched no legal challenge, gave no retaliatory interview, and allowed the immediate fury to pass without adding another wound. Through private letters carried by secure courier, he began speaking with Charles again. Their relationship no longer rested on ceremony or rank. It survived only as the fragile bond between a father and son. Charles felt the absence most sharply during family occasions. The king stopped searching for a perfect reconciliation because he finally understood that the old family could not be rebuilt by invitation alone. He mourned what had been lost, but he no longer confused hope with reality. The monarch had preserved contact with Harry, yet he had accepted that the younger prince would never return to the royal role he once held. William carried no sense of victory. The prince knew he had protected the institution, but he also knew Diana would once have begged both brothers to keep the door open. The sealed annex, a confidential attachment containing harsher possible restrictions, was never released because Harry's restraint made further punishment unnecessary. Its hidden clauses had been leverage, not revenge. Before the first state banquet under the new order, William studied the revised seating plan. A state banquet was a formal royal dinner held for visiting leaders, and every place at the table carried public meaning. He paused over the space where Harry's name would once have appeared, signed the document, and entered beside Catherine. The princess walked with him, understanding that duty had succeeded where family had failed. Meghan lost the title, but kept her voice. Harry lost his official place, but preserved a narrow path back to his father. Charles surrendered the illusion of unity. William accepted the burden of choosing the crown over his brother. And with William's signature sealed into the royal record, the Sussex chapter inside the working monarchy ended, not in reconciliation or revenge, but in a final, irreversible separation between the family they had been and the institution that remained. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.